Lawmakers this week finally approved a slate of criminal justice reform bills aimed at slowing the growth of Oklahoma's prison population. Legislators called the measures a significant step in reducing the state's high incarceration rates, but critics say the bills fall short of what's needed to address issues which have left prisons bursting at the seams.
Overcrowding in the state's prison system has been a long festering problem. Oklahoma leads the nation in incarceration rates for women and is on track to have the highest overall incarceration rates. The prison system is currently operating at 112% capacity, with the inmate population on April 15th standing at just over 27,000. A slate of reform measures recommended by Governor Mary Fallon's Oklahoma Justice Reform Task Force stalled in the legislature last year, but on Tuesday, lawmakers finally took action, approving 2 measures in the House and 5 more in the Senate.
Madam President, members, this is a part of the series of bills started by the good senator before me on criminal justice reform, which in totality, if we take all the bills together, will have a drastic impact on beds in the prison system in Oklahoma.
Senate Majority Floor Leader Greg Treat says while the bills will not immediately reduce the state's prison population, the legislation is still a significant accomplishment.
It changes the trajectory in the future. It slows the growth substantially. It will save millions of dollars over the long haul, and it will keep people as citizens who are paying taxes, who are raising families and contributing to society rather than being behind bars.
Several of the bills reduce penalties for non-violent offenses, putting the focus instead on alternatives to incarceration. While Treat says the legislation could potentially reduce the number of future prison beds needed by over 9,000, the Department of Corrections says compromises made to ensure passage have reduced that projected number to fewer than 5,000.
To me, that's
Oklahoma Corrections Director Joe Albaugh this week released a statement saying the advancement of these bills is an important step in the right direction to slow our prison population growth. This, however, does not change the fact that the state still needs 2 new medium security prisons to help us retire old, obsolete facilities. Treat concedes the legislation won't eliminate the need for those new prisons.
If I could do that overnight, I'd probably endanger public safety. Everything we did here was kept public safety first and foremost in our mind, and we didn't do anything to jeopardize the safety of the public. But we wanted to change the long-term trajectory in Oklahoma. We could not afford to stay on the course we were on.
Allie Shin is the External Affairs Director with ACLU of Oklahoma. Shin says while they're happy to see reform measures passed, these bills, in their opinion, do not constitute a victory in the effort to ease prison overcrowding.
Here we are at the end of session, knowing that our prison population is going to continue to grow so rapidly that we'll need to build at least 2 more prisons. What happened? We're promised year after year that there will be reform, and then the legislature fails to measure up.
This committee report is adopted.
Shin maintains the legislature should have more closely followed the governor's task force recommendations for reform.
We'll open the roll.
These measures have been watered down over the course of the year with a lot of input from district attorneys and legislators who are opposed to reform. The result is that these are weak measures that do little to nothing to actually address our mass incarceration crisis.
Chris Steele, chairman of Oklahomans for Criminal Justice Reform, agrees the measures passed in the House and Senate this week have undergone significant change since their original introduction.
They do not have the full impact of the original bills that were recommended by the task force, but these are significant changes in policy. I would suggest that these reforms represent about 60% of the impact of the original bills as they came out of the task force.
If you oppose the measure, vote nay.
Steele cites as one example Senate Bill 649, which targets habitual offenders, reducing penalties for theft and forgery-related crimes.
Originally, the bill applied to all nonviolent offenses, so long as the offense was only nonviolent and the history of the offender was only nonviolent. But by the time the bill was amended, it only included 9 nonviolent offenses, which again is a good start, but I would suggest that we would need to go back and revisit the other nonviolent offenses.
Nonetheless, Steele believes the measures do represent a long-awaited beginning toward changing the state's high incarceration rates.
We didn't get to have the highest rates overnight, and we're not going to undo the highest rates overnight either. So these reforms represent a very logical, methodical step in the right direction in reducing our prison population.
None of the bills passed this week include funding for mental health or substance abuse treatment, but Treat says additional bills will be considered in the coming weeks to address those issues.